Green Hill Zone. Has it been milked dry? Sure, but I think it hasn't been milked dry enough, so I'm officially naming today Hill Zone Appreciation Day, and on this day I'm going to be looking at all of the hill zones in Sonic. Green Hill, Pumpkin Hill, Seaside Hill, you name it. Of course we gotta start with the GOAT, Green Hill Zone. Despite being the first zone in Sonic 1, it's likely this was one of the last zones finished, as Sonic Team spent months tinkering with the level design to get it perfect. This was the very first introduction people were gonna have to the blue blur, so obviously he had to be wearing his Sunday best. They had to make sure this level drew people in, and hey, to their credit, it worked, because once you get to Marble Zone, you realize you've been catfished. So, you guys have heard of Green Hill Zone, but have you heard of Green Hills Zone? With an S? Green Hills is the fourth zone from the 8-bit Sonic 2 on the Game Gear and Master System. I have no idea how they got the name wrong. Apparently this was some sort of mistranslation as far as I know, because in Japanese the level is just called Green Hill as you'd expect. How did no one catch this error? This is the first stage from the original Sonic game, the best stage in the game, the most iconic level in the series, and some guy just decided to throw an S at the end for fun? Am I upset? Yeah. This is so minute, so silly, so inconsequential that it's infuriating. And the worst part is they didn't even use the Green Hill Zone music. But yeah, it's an okay zone. Next is Walmart brand Emerald Hill Zone from Sonic 2. Emerald Hill is a pretty simple first level, but things get a little more spicy if we peel back the layers a bit. Sonic 2 has easily some of the most famous examples of cut content in any video game ever. Like, one of the early zones was a stage called Genocide City Zone. I guess Shadow isn't the edgiest thing in the franchise.
You've got to be kidding me, guys. This is like taking candy from a baby, which is fine by me.
Stop it.
If we look at early game documents and prototype builds, it seems like Emerald Hill was actually just going to be called Green Hill, but for some reason they decided to change it. I honestly would have preferred if they just kept it as Green Hill, because now Emerald Hill just comes off as a shameless knockoff. There was a scrap stage called Emerald Isle Zone, so maybe they decided to steal the Emerald tag from that stage. Sonic 2 isn't done with its Hill Zone representation because its fifth level is Hilltop Zone. The naming scheme isn't exactly one-to-one, but hey, it's got Hill and Zone in the name, so hey, good enough for me. Hilltop Zone gets a pretty bad rep from the community because visually it's a palette swap of Emerald Hill, which itself was a copy of Green Hill Zone, so yeah, not a whole ton of originality there, but it's a cool stage. The stage is really open, allowing for you to skip portions of it with well-timed jumps. There's a substantial underground portion with earthquakes and lava too. Plus, the hillbilly music is glorious. Originally, Hilltop Zone was planned as a past version of Emerald Hill because early on in development, Sonic 2 was going to include time travel. If you want to learn more about that, go check out my Sonic 2 video. Now, for all the casuals out there, you probably thought we were done with the hill zones in Sonic 2, but man, are you dumb. Our next hill zone from Sonic 2 is Dust Hill Zone, or as it's known in the final version of the game, Mystic Cave Zone. Sonic 2's development history is worthy of an iceberg video with tons of name changes, redesigns, and unused concepts. At one point, Mystic Cave was called Dust Hill. I'm not sure why. Sure, it's a cave, and while I'm not a caveologist, I'm pretty sure caves are quite dusty, but where's the hill? The devs probably thought this was dumb too, so they decided to change the name to Mystic Cave. As for the zone itself, Mystic Cave is definitely one of the coolest zones from Sonic 2. There's tons of branching pathways, cool traps that keep you on your toes, and of course the music is a bop. The most infamous part of this level is, of course, if you've never heard of, then consider yourself a spoiled brat, because those of us who are less privileged are still haunted by that thing to this very day. Is what we call in the industry a beginner's trap. If you suck at the game and end up on the bottom route, you could potentially fall into this hole in the ground that is impossible to escape from. What makes so terrifying is that it's not a bottomless pit. There's spikes at the bottom, so you have to sit there and accept your death as it slowly kills you. So imagine if you fall into as Supersonic. Hope you brought a good book to read. In the mobile version of Sonic 2 and in Sonic Origins, there's a secret that they added in If you fall in there in these updated versions, then it actually takes you to Hidden Palace Zone, which was another cut level from Sonic 2. This is a really cool little bonus, and I wouldn't mind if they did more stuff like this in the future. Whoa. You thought we were done with Sonic 2? No. We've still got one more hill zone. Neo Green Hill Zone. Neo Green Zone. Early on in development, Aquatic Ruin Zone was called Neo Green Hill Zone. It's weird that they called it Neo Green Hill because Neo is another word for new, but this stage is a lot more rustic looking, which is probably why they ended up calling it Aquatic Ruin. Aquatic Ruin is known as one of the better water levels in the Sonic series and in platforming games in general, because if you're good at the game, you can skip all the water sections. This level does have some cheap enemy placement, but like I mentioned, if you stay on the top path, you can skip the annoying parts, and there are a few moments when you can really build up a bit of speed. So it's an alright level in my book. Plus the boss fight is really fun to cheese. Alright, finally we're done with Sonic 2. Next up is Turquoise Hill from Sonic Chaos on the Game Gear. It's a pretty inoffensive first level for a Sonic game. No complaints really, just a solid stage. This game continues the trend that I love of all of the Green Hill knockoffs being named after shades of green. Green Hill, Emerald Hill, Turquoise Hill, etc. Unfortunately, this would be the last game to use this idea, which sucks because I love a good naming scheme. They would continue this naming scheme in the comics with stuff like Verdant Hill and Jade Hill, but there's also a Brown Hill. I guess someone didn't get the memo there. But I'm keeping this video strictly about the game, so that's enough of that. Sonic Chaos, like Sonic 2, couldn't have just one hill zone because we've also got Mecha Green Hill Zone. Like Green Hills in Sonic 2 on the Game Gear, Mecha Green Hill is the fourth zone in this game. Now, this is how you do a Green Hill clone right. They took Green Hill and corrupted it into this stainless steel roboticized atrocity. It really reminds me of the way Sonic CD's Bad Future levels are mechanized dystopian versions of the present stages. Speaking of Sonic CD, the music for Mecha Green Hill and Green Hills is actually a remix of You Can Do Anything, the Japanese theme song for Sonic CD. It is a little annoying that they didn't remix the original music for Green Hill Zone. It would have been cool to get a techno Bad Future mix of the song for Mecha Green Hill, but hey, Sonic CD is my favorite Sonic soundtrack, so who cares? It does seem a bit weird to use a remix of a song from Sonic CD for these levels, but it makes sense when you find out that Naofumi Hataya and Masafumi Ogata, the composers for Sonic CD, also did the music for this game. If I had to guess why they opted not to use Green Hill's theme music, it could be because Masato Nakamura, the composer for the Genesis versions of Sonic 1 and 2, owns the song, so I guess Sega didn't want to pay up. The fact that Sega got new composers for Sonic 3 and Knuckles only makes me want to believe that theory even more. Speaking of Sonic 3 and Knuckles, next up is Mushroom Hill Zone, the first stage in the and Knuckles portion of the game. However, in the complete game, this is the 7th zone in the lineup, which is a tad weird considering it's a pretty easy level. Though honestly, I'm fine with a bit of a difficulty drop. Since this is the beginning of the second act of the story, having a breather to ease you back in after the more difficult launch-based zone is nice. There are 11 rings in total, though 2 are only available on the Knuckles route. However, that's more than enough for you to get access to Super or Hypersonic in just the very first zone. Really cool. Mushroom Hill does have some annoying stuff like those little tethers that you have to spin dash to get out of and the awful seesaw things that you have to press up and down repeatedly to go upwards. However, as a whole, it is a good level. I love how as you progress through the zone, the color palette changes from the typical green to a more reddish and autumn looking color. Then the colors become very washed out near the end, reminding me of how trees and plants look during the winter before cycling back to the green of spring and summer for the boss fight. Well, that's it for the classic era. On to the adventure era, with the first new hill zone being, well, not even really a zone, as this is a sub-game for the Tales story of Sonic Adventure called Sand Hill. This level is a lot like the snowboarding section of Ice Cap, but instead of boarding on snow, it's on sand. This level was included in the game because when Sonic Team was developing Sonic Adventure, they went on a trip throughout Central and South America. They took inspiration from many of the things they saw on their trip and included them into the game, one of which being a group of people boarding on sand dunes. As a stage, it's pretty cool. You gotta avoid obstacles and go through these gates to increase your score. No complaints from me, and I'll always love a hill zone that's a bit more original. Speaking of original hill zones, next is the second Knuckles stage from Sonic Adventure 2, Pumpkin Hill. Easily one of the most memorable stages from the game, if not the entire franchise. Pumpkin Hill, from an aesthetic perspective, is fantastic. A range of spooky pillars high in the sky with ghost trains and pumpkin-shaped mountains. While I may not be a fan of the Knuckles or Rouge stages, this is definitely one of the better ones. It can be satisfying gliding over these bottomless pits, giving a strong sense of freedom. And of course, I have to mention the music. Hot take, but this isn't my favorite song of all the Knuckles stages. Huh? It's not bad. In fact, it's awesome. The composition by Tomoya Otani is fantastic. Definitely has a late 80s, early 90s West Coast hip-hop vibe to it. And the vocals from rapper Hunnit P are actually pretty decent. Lyrically, it's one of the better Knuckles raps. But I'm sorry, you still can't top Aquatic Mine. The same year we got Sonic Adventure 2, we also got Sonic Advance, and with it another take on Green Hill, the first zone of the game, Neo Green Hill Zone. If you remember earlier on in this video, Neo Green Hill was actually the name for Aquatic Ruin, so I guess they decided to finally use the name officially. Sonic Advance was the big return to 2D Sonic, so they decided to bring back Green Hill, albeit with some changes. What I love about Neo Green Hill is that it starts off much more coastal in its design than the original Green Hill, seeming more like a beach stage than a grassland stage. However, as you progress through the level, it starts looking more like the Green Hill we know and love. Then, by the end of Act 2, you reach a bridge which leads to Secret Base Zone. Just like with Mushroom Hill, I love the way that the stage evolves as you run through it. All in all, a solid stage. My only complaint is, again, they didn't remix the original Green Hill music. I get not doing it for the little spin-off Game Gear games, but this was Sonic's big return to 2D. And not just that, it was Sonic's 10th anniversary. Come on, Sega. Sonic Team would continue the beach theme from Neo Green Hill with Seaside Hill, the first stage in Sonic Heroes. Now, Seaside Hill is technically only the name of the first level in the game, but the next stage, Ocean Palace, takes place in the exact same setting, so I'm gonna count that as Seaside Hill Act 2. Sonic Heroes does this weird thing where all of the individual stages have different names despite each set of two clearly being Act 1 and Act 2 of each other. That aside, Seaside Hill is a great first level. It goes all in on the coastal feel from the early parts of Neo Green Hill, reminding me a lot of Emerald Coast from SA1, although this stage does bring back the checkerboard pattern from Green Hill. Once we get to Ocean Palace, aka Seaside Hill Act 2, the ruins that were present in the first act become much more prominent, turning into a huge seaside palace. I like this stage a lot. The different character types, speed, flight, and power, allow for you to tackle the stage in different ways, and the Ocean Palace theme is a fantastic track. Heroes' soundtrack is a sleeper hit. Heroes is the third mainline 3D Sonic game, and we would also get the third game in the 2D Sonic Advance series the same year in Sonic Advance 3. Heroes and Advance 3 were the first two Sonic games I ever played, so I have a ton of memories with these games. Advance 3 would give us another hill zone in Sunset Hill Zone, the second zone of the game. Basically, it's Green Hill Zone, but at happy hour. Having Green Hill take place at sunset is a subtle but cute twist that it makes the level feel different enough while still keeping that old school charm. And what makes this stage better than every other Green Hill clone is that they finally brought back the Green Hill Zone theme. I'm a sucker for the GBA sound font, and the remixes of the song they have for each act are great. As a level, it's good too. It adds some new gimmicks to Green Hill like grind rails, vines you spin around, and these cute bungee cords. Unfortunately, that's it for the Adventure era hill zones. Next, on to Modern Sonic. First up is Grass Hill Zone from Sonic the Hedgehog. It's a game for the Leapfrog, one of the educational entertainment handheld consoles made by the company Leapfrog Enterprises back in the 2000s. The original Leapster console was released back in 2003, but later in 2008 we got the upgraded Leapster 2 and the Leapster, which was a higher-end alternative to the Leapster 2. Was the customizable mature option, while the stupid baby Leapster 2 was for the little dumb baby 5-year-olds. The was for sophisticated and intelligent 8-year-olds. As for Sonic, you basically go through some Sonic levels and you have to do a bunch of spelling tests. I guess if you want to teach your kids how to spell, this is one way to do it. The game has 6 levels, with each pair of levels making up a larger zone. Grass Hill Zone contains Green Hill and Emerald Hill, although Green Hill looks like Emerald Hill and the background music is from Mushroom Hill. This is so jarring. This game just couldn't get anything right. The weirdest error is the game using Sandopolis' music for Hydro City Zone. This is cursed. Okay, enough of that. On to... Splash Hill Zone from Sonic the Hedgehog 4 Episode 1. Oh, Sonic 4, you were definitely a game that came out. Yeah, the stage looks plastic and the physics are off, but it's really just an okay stage, honestly. There's some gimmicks that set it apart from the original Green Hill too, like the vines you can swing on in Act 2 and the zip lines in Act 3. I don't hate it. We got another hill zone in 2010, but it came from an unlikely place. Rokaku Hill from Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing. This place actually comes from the Jet Set Radio series and was included as a stage. It's definitely different from every other hill zone. You're driving through the city, going down streets, in the subway, and even through construction. I love Jet Set Radio, one of the coolest Sega IPs, so this stage gets a stamp of approval from me. Moving right along here, we have Windy Hill from Sonic Lost World. Lost World is one of the games that no one hates, but no one loves either. However, Windy Hill is honestly a really awesome stage. The whole cylindrical level layout is pretty unique, and I really enjoy the way Sonic controls in this game. You can build up a lot of speed, but the controls feel tight enough for platforming. Windy Hill is very open, allowing for a ton of freedom in how you progress. Aesthetically, it's very similar to Green Hill, but Lost World's unique level design makes it pretty distinct. It's time we wrap up this video with a double feature. Sandy Hills and High Hill Park from the mobile game Sonic Forces Speed Battle. Sandy Hills is a sandy version of Green Hill, and High Hill Park is a fairly standard city level. I haven't actually sat down and played Speed Battle yet, so I can't comment on it too much, but hey, it's a thing. I do like the amount of playable characters in this game though. Well, guys, that's about it for the Hill Zones and Sonic games. Like I said, there are plenty of others in the comics, like Tower Hill, Fire Ant Hill, Glass Hill, Jonah Hill, King of the Hill, a lot of hills. But yeah, that's the video. Was it pointless? Yeah, but hey, it was pretty fun. If I missed any of the Hill Zones, be sure to let me know how stupid I am in the comments. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did, there's a whole playlist of videos just like this one on the left side of the screen. If you want to be notified when I post a new video, then click on the subscribe button and the notification bell. If you'd be so kind, click the like button too before you go, as it really helps the channel grow. Thanks guys, remember it's all uphill from here, and have a good one.